This is the story of a programmer named Kurata, who is obsessed with mecha, which are giant robots and everything related to them. Because of this obsession, when the company he worked for assigned him a new task related to designing a new toy robot, the task was a perfect fit for him. Thanks to his obsession, he completed it very quickly. After that, he spent his salary on buying every new mecha he saw. However, since this is an isekai story, it wouldn't be complete without the presence of Recap-Kun. That's how he ended up being sent to another world, where he became known as Echeverria Ernesti, though his friends called him Ernie. In this new world, he was reborn as a child from an aristocratic family who was on a journey back home with his grandfather and mother. But suddenly, they were attacked by giant demons. Fortunately, his grandfather, who was skilled with a sword, fought back, and so did his mother, Celestina, who used magic. Both were able to protect themselves from the monsters. But then another demon appeared and attacked the carriage where Ernie was. As the demon was about to devour him, his father arrived with a robot named Shield King and, with a single shot, defeated the demon, saving Ernie's life. When Ernie woke up, he realized that he had been reincarnated in another world. As he looked around, his eyes sparkled at the sight of the mecha he loved so much that he immediately hugged the robot instead of thanking his father. This is the beginning of a story about demons and giant robots, where Ernie could fulfill his dream of piloting one of those robots. We then see that Ernie was born in the city of Ayala, known as a place to train the king's runners, the night pilots of the mechas. Considering this, his father told Ernie that he had to master magic and swordsmanship first before he could pilot one of those robots. And he also needed to grow bigger. For the next 3 years, Ernie trained in swordsmanship and magic to achieve his goal. In that world, magic was considered a form of programming, and since Ernie was an expert in this in his previous life, he quickly mastered advanced magic. Thanks to this, he met his best friends, Archie and Adeltrud, although he first encountered Adai. When he saved one of them from almost falling off a roof, they agreed to learn magic from Ernie, and they became close friends. This allowed them to easily enter the Night Pilot Academy in Ayala. From the first class, Ernie stood out because of his obsession, which led him to already know the basics of magic that were required to be taught at the academy. Ernie considered skipping the basic classes after a professor mentioned that he was too small to pilot a mecha. However, he planned to design his own robot to fit his size. Though he wanted to grow up quickly, his impatience and enthusiasm led him to help a child being bullied by some other kids outside the academy. With the help of his friends, they managed to retrieve the hammer that had been taken from that child, whose name was Batson. Unlike Ernie, Batson was training to become a knightsmith, a robot mechanic. Since Ernie was determined to customize his weaponry, Batson became the best friend he could have from the start of school. When Ernie visited the workshop where Batson worked, he shared an idea to modify his magic wand to be more efficient by restructuring it into a sort of gun. This idea was so well liked by one of the blacksmiths that it became Ernie's first weapon, which he later used in the academy exam. Ernie even asked one of his professors if he could skip the basic magic classes and go straight to the advanced ones if he passed the exam with high marks. When Ernie was ready for the shooting exam, he surprised everyone with the power of his magic wand, allowing him to skip the basic classes and move directly to the advanced ones. From that moment on, Ernie quickly gained fame at the academy. However, 3 years later, Ernie continued to try to better understand mechas until he began studying how to create an ether reactor, the heart that powers the mechas. Even though this was something highly confidential and not revealed to the public, Ernie seemed to possess knowledge that would make others envious, so it wasn't impossible for him to succeed. However, Batson could only assist Ernie manually with his ideas. Later, Ernie bid farewell to his mechanic friend as he had to take part in a field exam with the other students. They would go to a forest with a low demon population, a perfect place for some students to practice swordsmanship or magic while others practiced piloting their robots and escorting the other students. As they were training, the sister of one of Ernie's friends, a waifu named Estefania, who was aware of Ernie's achievements, approached him. However, Estefania suddenly hugged Ernie because she didn't want another woman to take him away from her. After this encounter, Ernie's other sibling, Adai, told Ernie that although Estefania was their sister, since they were born from different mothers, they were not recognized as nobility and were considered illegitimate children. Ernie then asked them what they wanted to do, whether they wanted to accept the situation, destroy the family, or take other extreme actions. But their friend stopped them, saying it wasn't necessary to go that far. However, this also led Ernie to tell them that they could always count on him, even for the darkest matters. After that, Ernie admired his friends' mechas. One of them, a kind man named Edgar, kindly offered to show Ernie the inside of his robot, which almost brought Ernie to tears because he could finally see how a mecha worked from the inside. A night circus was being piloted, but the event was interrupted when an alarm sounded because a horde of demons was approaching. Therefore, everyone prepared for evacuation. However, the high school students were on the front lines, putting themselves in danger as they had no support during this first wave. Ernie, not one to stand idle, jumped in to help them because among them were the siblings of his friends who were indeed in danger. Despite having strong magic, he was almost overwhelmed by the sheer number of enemies. But at that moment, Ernie appeared with his magic gun and managed to drive the demons back. Adai also provided assistance, saving the situation until the robots arrived to protect them. Even so, it was very strange that so many monsters appeared. It turned out that, from a distance, there was a large demon that surprised one of the knights who seemed to be guarding the fortress near the forest. However, this monster managed to reach the main guard headquarters, where, upon arrival, it destroyed everything, easily crushing each mecha knight by trampling them and breathing fire that penetrated everything. Therefore, the guards requested help from the Hampton Knights Order, a group of warriors who could be their hope. But when the messenger arrived before them, he was disappointed to find that there were only a few knights. Nonetheless, when they learned that the students were training in the Croak Forest, they quickly rushed to rescue them. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Ernie is in the process of rescuing his friends. Afterward, Estefania personally comes to thank him, even hugging him warmly. This gesture doesn't bother Ernie, but it annoys DC. As a result, Ernie finds himself having to deal with two girls fighting over him. However, this beautiful moment is interrupted when a giant demon named Megiamont arrives, the very reason why Ernie suspected this unusual monster attack. They were fleeing from that creature. To prevent the demon from approaching the other students, they engage it in battle. However, some students and their mecha become overly confident in their ability to defeat it, particularly one who panics after witnessing one of his friends die, causing him to flee. In his desperation, this individual falls into a place where his robot becomes stuck. Ernie, having seen him earlier, chases after him, and upon realizing what he had done, knocks him unconscious without hesitation. In an effort to pilot the robot, Ernie takes time to adjust it to fit his small size. Using a pistol rod, Ernie programs the robot to optimize it to his liking. With his programming knowledge, he successfully operates the machine, realizing his dream. Meanwhile, his friends begin to suspect what Ernie has done, but there's no time to discuss it as Senpai Edgar is in trouble fighting Begimond. Ernie arrives at the last moment to save him from fighting alone due to Dietrich's mistake. Here, Ernie demonstrates the effectiveness of his attacks, launching strikes from all directions. But despite trying everything, Ernie can only manage to scratch the monster. Even after delivering an attack from within, Begimond doesn't retreat, thanks to a reinforcement crystal that makes it hard to penetrate. Even so, Ernie's efforts aren't in vain. Besides saving his friends, he also buys time for reinforcements to arrive. When the veteran soldiers arrive, they're shocked that a student managed to hold off Begimond. Thanks to that, they're able to plan an attack that successfully weakens the monster. However, Begimond doesn't give up easily. After seeing his legs attacked, he spews fire onto the ground, destroying several robots. Seeing his beloved robots being destroyed, Ernie becomes furious and decides to join the action alongside the reinforcements. Once Senpai and Dietrich recover, Ernie devises a plan to defeat Begimond once and for all. Ernie leads the mecha and advances to the front of the robot to prepare a barrage of attacks that can channel electricity into the monster. The first step is successful, but he realizes that this monster won't give up. However, with the cooperation between Ernie and Dietrich, who manage to dodge the monster's relentless attacks, Ernie delivers a blow that brings the giant down. After the battle ends, Senpai and the other soldiers realize that this victory was thanks to a small student obsessed with Iljuatnai, surprising everyone except his friends. Ernie then admits to them that stealing the mecha is something he might do again. But to avoid danger, he will build a robot that fits his size and control it more efficiently. Ernie's achievements reach the ears of the king, who becomes suspicious of him. Seeing that a young boy from the most famous warrior family already possesses such power at a young age, the king decides to summon him. Ernie, along with his grandfather, comes to see the king, who, under the guise of wanting to reward him, wants to get to know and test him. The king then asks what Ernie desires. After thinking for a moment, Ernie decides to ask for something ambitious, something only the king could give: information about the ether reactor. This request is something only known to the king, who ultimately agrees. However, defeating Begimond is not enough to earn that right. The king then challenges him to create his own Shield Knight model. If Ernie wants to have his own robot, before being given the blueprint for its heart, he must first build its shell. Although this complicates things a bit for his grandfather, for Ernie, everything is going perfectly because now he can work freely at the academy. His ability to attract attention catches the eye of Lord Cerati, the father of his friends. He even asks them to keep an eye on Ernie until he finishes his first robot. However, the next day, Ernie immediately begins working on his design. As soon as he arrives at the workshop, he attracts attention by nearly creating an organism when they see the robot he destroyed during the battle against Bejimund. The workshop leader hears what he's thinking, and although his friend Batson tries to stop him out of embarrassment, the truth is that once he presents his idea, he astonishes everyone. First, he proposes making crystal braids as the material for the robot. With this, he would enhance their durability and eliminate the limitations of the machine, something he learned from the previous battle. Then, when Edgar and Helvey from the Empire arrive, as Ernie mentioned, he proposes another idea to simplify the long-range attacks carried out by Mecha with their rods. Instead of using a sword in one hand and a rod in the other, it would be easier to add 2 more arms dedicated to long-range attacks. With this, only a programming code addition is required so as not to interfere with their operation, which is their main concern. After testing, Edgar proves that the attacks become easier to execute. However, there are still some things that need to be prepared. Ernie, taking advantage of the fact that his grandfather is the academy director, asks for permission to start making smaller parts of the robot so that some students can practice operating the mecha. All of this is done so that his friends can assist him in the upcoming battle. Worried about Ernie, they ask him to teach them how to drive. Eventually, the entire academy works hard, with Batson and his friends helping with the small format of the Silhopenais. This makes training with these parts a bit difficult as they have to adapt. But Edgar is surprised by the changes Dietrich undergoes after meeting Ernie. Additionally, the tests conducted after modifying the mecha are also astonishing. Helvey is the first to test the changes, feeling that the strength of the crystal braids makes operation a bit difficult. But, like all new things, it's just a matter of adaptation. However, the shooting tests are very successful as all the shots hit their targets. The final test is to conduct a simulation battle between the robots. Senpai fights against Helvey, where, despite having great technique, Ernie seems to have a weakness because Helvey is not one of the best pilots. But with the modifications made to his robot, his brute strength is enough to corner his opponent. Although not having the advantage, Ernie dares to make the final attack by striking directly, and nearly manages to turn the tables if Helvey hadn't knocked him down. When Helvey is about to deliver the final blow, he stops midway due to a lack of mana, causing him to lose. Although this is a bit disappointing, everyone feels happy because the test was very successful. They just need to optimize energy consumption, but aside from that, everything works perfectly. However, during the celebration held by the students, a suspicious man infiltrates. After quietly leaving the party, he heads to a hideout where he meets with a group of suspicious people who pay him to report that the test was successful. Now the question arises, who are these people? It turns out they are part of a foreign order intent on stealing information. But aside from that, the main issue Ernie's face is overcoming the excessive mana consumption in the new model. Increasing the energy container would add weight to one side, accelerating mana consumption. Ernie considers various solutions, but he hits a dead end until a die suggests, turning the crystal braid into a sort of muscle network for the robot. By applying this idea, although the mecha becomes very strong, its energy consumption can be optimized. The same idea is applied to the smaller version of the robot, which is tested with his friends, and the results are more than outstanding, attracting the attention of many. Ernie has made revolutionary modifications, so he must present his work to the Silver Knight Laboratory. However, remember that Mr. Cerati has sent his children to monitor Ernie. Those who believe in their father's good intentions immediately report the results to him, who then reports to Duke Didgard. The Duke then sends the Crimson Hairs group to test the new model. Finally, this group, along with Ernie's new model, is sent to fight a lava monster, hoping to sabotage all the hard work. However, Ernie's easily defeat the demon. Duke Didgard is stunned by the outstanding performance of the new model created by Ernie, which is capable of coordinated attacks and achieving victory over the lead demon. After that, we also see the strange people from before, who turn out to be members of the Bronze Fang Order. They discuss the new mecha model created by Ernie, emphasizing its superiority over their own models, warning that they should not underestimate the ability of these robots to breach the Cassadius barrier. Meanwhile, the expedition group that had departed has returned home, but the only one missing is Ernie. Although Adai is eager to reunite with him, it's impossible because Ernie is summoned by the Duke for an interview about the modifications he made. There, without any trouble, Ernie explains all the tasks he has accomplished. After finishing, the Duke informs him that he will claim credit for the entire research and present it to the king as if it were his own. In short, he intends to steal the research. However, Ernie doesn't care. In fact, he feels relieved that someone else can say all that he has said. This reaction baffles the Duke, as he cannot understand why Ernie would so easily give up his work. The Duke wants to know his true intentions, and Ernie says that he doesn't care because he plans to present an even better model to the king. The Duke doesn't believe there could be any further improvements but cannot imagine how someone could create circuits with such innovative ideas. For 300 years, no one else has managed to do it, and it's especially hard to believe that someone could build a robot almost from scratch. Considering that, in the past, the king had tried to do something similar. He lets Hernia move freely. In the end, it becomes the boy's obsession. Meanwhile, back home, Ernie's friends, along with Estefania, go to interrogate her father, demanding an explanation for Ernie's absence because they suspect her father leaked information to benefit from his friend's work. However, her father explains that if the Duke requested a meeting, given how extraordinary Ernie is, he would surely be able to convince the Duke to support his research, which indeed happens. This causes Ernie to stay at the Duke's fortress for an extended period to continue working on improvements. As a result, the others, including the workshop head, his senpai, especially Addy, under the pretext of looking for one of his robots, decide to go to where Ernie is to find out what happened to him. However, we see that near Ernie's location, in Casadias, some demons are causing havoc. This gives those secretly monitoring Ernie a chance to start acting. Taking advantage of the situation when the Duke sends his mecha to fight, the Bronze Fang group attacks the weakened soldiers to steal the new model that Ernie had modified. After that, using those robots, the group manages to infiltrate the Casadias fortress, which belongs to the Count. They succeed in stealing more new models that Ernie had worked on, as well as some other models already owned by the Duke. Amid this chaos, Ernie wants to participate, but the Duke doesn't allow it due to the importance of his safety. Instead, the Duke decides to play his trump card, a warrior from the guard who possesses a very powerful robot. This warrior faces off against the leader of the group in what seems to be a balanced match. However, the modifications made by Ernie are too strong, allowing the group leader to defeat the knight using a special accessory weapon that gives him an advantage over the old model. In the end, he escapes with another member, disappointed that they only managed to steal 2 models from the fortress for their country. Even so, on their way, they encounter Ernie's friends who have just arrived, including Senpai Edgar, who asks the Count's mecha about what happened. However, receiving no answers from their allies who appear, they almost fall into an ambush. This sparks a battle between robots, which this time is relatively balanced since both models have been modified. This surprises the group leader. One of his subordinates sacrifices himself to stop these students, allowing his leader to escape from their sight. However, Kit and Addy cannot stand by while their friends are being attacked right before their eyes. Therefore, using the mini model created by Ernie, they join the battle. Although it seems they arrived late, the fight is still intense as Ernie observes the battle from the tower. He thinks about intervening, but without his own mecha, it's difficult to fight the Circo Knights. Suddenly, he sees the carriage carrying his friends arriving, and he knows he can get one of the armors he created. Of course, he manages to get the armor, then descends into the battlefield and defeats the enemies one by one, either by crushing their heads or electrocuting them. Thus, Ernie manages to secure the fortress for himself, and with the help of the Red Rabbit leader, they go in search of the stolen robots. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a battle ensues between the leader of the Copper Fang and Edgar. This battle is extremely difficult for the senpai, who finds himself increasingly cornered despite Kit and Addy already dealing with the other enemies. As their swords clash, Edgar retreats slightly, taking a hit that damages the central helmet of his robot. Finally, his friend Dietrich arrives and faces a dilemma: help his friend or chase after the enemy who stole the robot. In this situation, Kit and Addy arrive to provide support, and Ernie also arrives with the other leader. When they decide to split up to pursue the thief, a horde of monsters larger than those they encountered in the forest during school training suddenly appears. They must first face all these monsters, save the people, and fight all night against the beasts. But as a result, the thief manages to escape with the new model that was created. This causes the king himself to summon them later to congratulate them, first for their hard work, but this time he requests greater secrecy in Ernie's work. Thus, he forms a new knight order called Felix Platido, with Ernie as its leader, so he can work comfortably on the new designs he envisions. Since the enemy country has stolen one of the new designs, a stronger resistance must be built. With that, Edgar apologizes to Helby for allowing himself to be defeated. But rumors circulating in the Duke's corridors suggest that this enemy country has a strong network. It seems they are using Course, a powerful magic potion to transform demons, which explains why they appeared near the fortress. With all this, it's time to return to Ernie's hometown, Ayala. While dreaming of the mecha from his former world, Ernie is tightly embraced by Addie, who doesn't want to be separated from him. Meanwhile, at the Silhouette Laboratory, the researchers are very impressed with Ernie's innovations, until someone appears who is envious because he has never seen such changes after so long and wants to make a name for himself by challenging Ernie. Likewise, after the incident at Casadius, the old leaders are discussing the threat from neighboring countries in the west, where after the theft of Ernie's model, they might soon attack. Therefore, they agree to organize the Aguilanal Order to be ready to face any hidden enemy movements. Meanwhile, Ernie is having dinner with his family and tells them that he is the leader of the new order, and that he created the new model for the circus night. Hearing this good news, he almost brings the academy under his control after establishing it as his base. Similarly, Ernie says goodbye to Estefania, who never tires of hugging him. This way, Ernie starts his new year to make changes to improve productivity in his new robot models. For this, he sets up the Silhouette gear for warriors who can move loads and receive modifications from Duke Discord. As time goes by, everything seems to be going well until Ernie creates various experimental models not only to increase the speed of the robots but also to have models with other specializations such as defense or attack. Meanwhile, Ernie's order welcomes new students, where a Wi-Fi infiltrator appears and speaks separately with Ernie. She is Nora, a member of the Eagle Order, who is there to reinforce the security of the work being done at the academy. However, this meeting seemed suspicious to Addie as he was worried about losing his hernia. But instead, Addie took advantage of the opportunity to bring his friends to conduct some experiments, which nearly cost him his life. This all happened because he tried using a type of booster that caused him to crash into a tree. As a result, Ernie was reprimanded for being obsessed despite the dangers, but people didn't understand that this was part of the trial and error process. As it was, Ernie learned more about the modifications that needed to be made, so he let the girls go take a bath while he continued to repair the robot, creating a sort of dagger that functioned as a key to activate the mecha to prevent it from being stolen again. He also prepared a mecha that could be piloted by two people. Since they needed to be compatible, he chose Addie and Ernie for the task. He also made various modifications to have a variety of models ready for the upcoming battle. The time arrived for the robots from both sides to parade. The robots from the laboratory were an upgrade of what Ernie had already built with crystal fibers, only adding the best pilots the kingdom had. On the other hand, Ernie entered the arena with a very flashy mecha that didn't walk but ran instead because it was shaped like a centaur, and pulled a sort of chariot that contained various mecha he had designed. This way, Ernie caught the attention of the king, who seemed impressed, as did everyone else. However, the final test would take place in the arena, so let the battle begin. The battle would be 6 against 4 because the laboratory's mecha were weaker in terms of power, and had to compensate with numbers. As soon as the battle began, Ernie was the first to attack with his mecha, which had a mechanism to fly, surprising all the spectators. However, although he could face 3 enemies at once, his mana consumption was too excessive, so he had to retreat from the battle to rest, leaving the rest of the fight to his friends. The Centaur mecha, with its speed, headed to the center of the opposing team, while Ernie, Dietrich, and Edgar, with a combination of attack and defense, surprised their opponents with the force of their attacks, with Edgar managing to stun one of the enemies. Although they initially dominated, the strain from their boost made the battle difficult against skilled pilots who managed to maintain their defenses. With Zill and Nice being more stable, they had an advantage in endurance. However, Ernie's team managed to recover thanks to Anicapped's participation, who destroyed some mechas, just like the duet of Edgar and Dietrich. But the decisive contribution from Ernie secured victory, although it ultimately ended in a draw as there were still improvements needed in Ernie's design. However, this performance was enough to catch the attention of a noble named Immers and to gain recognition from the opposing team's renowned pilots. What attracted the most attention was the laboratory's blacksmith, who immediately ran to interrogate Ernie about what he had done, especially with the centaur. Ernie, pleased with this enthusiasm, seemed to have gained a new friend who was a fan of the circuit knights. Ernie's friends had to separate them so the king could speak with the head of the laboratory about improving Ernie's design and making it more efficient in battle. With this agreement concluded, 2 months passed with various changes, particularly the abdication of King Ambrosio to make way for his son, Rio Tambos, who then officially succeeded Ambrosio as king. Embriz, who had just returned from abroad, was very happy and enthusiastic in training. Meanwhile, Ernie graduated from the academy, where he barely attended classes and worked more as a robot mechanic. However, due to his achievements, he was recognized and transferred to the Silver Phoenix Order at Alvar Fortress, where he would refine his inventions. He would also work on a personal request from the former King Ambrosio to create a new robot for his son. Thus, Ernie was asked to build a mecha that emphasized strength according to the prince's request. After a few days, Ernie appeared with the order, presenting two robots with the same specifications but different designs, one resembling a golden lion and the other a silver tiger. Between Ambrosio and Embriz, their preference fell on the golden lion. To determine who would pilot it, they held a friendly duel. And Rai, who acted like his grandfather in his youth, faced a very tight battle where strength and agility were tested. Although his grandfather was old, he remained skilled with a spear, which had earned him a reputation in his youth when he snuck into battles against demons. However, the prince was also not lacking in his sword technique, managing to land a final blow that almost put him in a difficult position. Yet, he was able to counter with a judo throw delivered by his grandfather. Thus, Bridge won the title of pilot of the Golden Lion. But while all this was happening, it seemed that a large number of demons were moving in the forest, disturbing a mysterious creature that sensed their presence. However, for now, this didn't need much thought because a crisis was emerging in the kingdom due to an attack by a group of demons organized like ants and moving towards the throat, particularly the village of Ulfheim. Protecting this area had to be done at all costs. The question is, why? In a few words, because in that place, the Kingdom of French was building an ether reactor. If that place was destroyed, Ernie would not be able to design the hernia mecha anymore. Realizing this, he was filled with rage against the demons and immediately launched an attack to reach a fortress threatened by the large number of demons that appeared. Although the guards attacked them, the number of enemies did not seem to decrease, so the only thing the warriors could do was wait. However, at the critical moment, the Silver Phoenix Order arrived, and with their larger ranks, the centaurs significantly reduced the number of demons. But that wasn't all, because after the other units, including the princes and the old king's mecha, landed, they managed to reduce nearly half the monsters with just one strike. Not to mention Dietrich's and Edgar's squads, who did an excellent job. But the monsters wouldn't stop until their queen was neutralized. That's why Ernie headed straight for the queen, and after being transported by a chariot with his friends, they arrived at the forest where the queen was. The queen was a dangerous creature like a behemoth, meaning she had great endurance. With the help of his friends, Ernie managed to wound her by tearing off the part of her body holding her offspring, then attacked together at her extremities to bring her down and give Army the chance to deliver the final blow. With this victory, Hernia's reputation grew, but the king's promise had yet to be fulfilled. But this time was an opportunity because Ambrosio, keeping his word, ordered the head of the laboratory to teach how to build an ether reactor in his village. It turned out that an androgynous person named Alper was a resident of the area, and the reactor maker was a race called Abre. Due to their long lifespans, they could use special magic to create the reactor. For further explanation, Ernie had to meet with their elder leader, who gave permission despite warning that Ernie might not be able to understand the essence of the reactor. However, Ernie was still eager to learn the secret and began 3 months of training in the village to master the art of creating robot cores, whose difficulty lay in the unique Arab magic that processed mithril, a very durable material, to absorb ether from the environment and convert it into mana. In this way, the reactor could be built, which consumed demon crystals, and the stronger the reactor, the more powerful it became. To complete this part's creation, a special encryption type was needed that emitted the vital circulation of a heart. However, given that in his previous life Ernie was a programmer, it only took 3 months for Ernie to create his own version of the reactor. After leaving the place, he finally met with Attic, who missed him greatly. However, once back at the workshop, Ernie finally created an incredibly powerful robot that was truly unstoppable. And when Nora informed Ernie that the enemy had started to move and would likely attack soon, he spent a lot of time with the girl, and wanted to mark his territory by challenging her. However, Nora explained that she was not a homewrecker, so he could be at ease. With that, Laddie wanted to go on a date with Ernie, but he told her to be patient and that he would grant it later. However, the time for fun had to be postponed because outside the kingdom, a country called Solutek was on the rise. It turns out that King Carlitos feels confident in his military strength because he now possesses new models of mecha, mass-produced based on the first mecha design stolen from Ernie, the Unlucky Kid. The nation of Solutek, which poses a dangerous threat due to its rapid territorial conquests, was first confronted by the neighboring kingdom of Franville, which hoped to hold out long enough at Sildatrida Fortress after their king left the meeting for tactical strategy. We are introduced to his daughter, Leonora, who is worried about her father, and I have to say from the start, she is the most annoying character in this anime. With the enemy at the doorstep, once they have soldiers on their border, Sepperka prepares their cavalry, believing they have the local advantage. However, the enemy surprises them with an aerial assault using some kind of airship that bombards the fortress and the capital from above, facing mechas that land in the city center and overwhelm Sepperka's army, who stand no chance at all. The king, with a plan to preserve his bloodline, has his daughter flee while he distracts the enemy by requesting a one-on-one duel with the enemy prince to allow Honor to escape. However, the scenario does not favor him as the enemy demonstrates their superiority by completely destroying the king's robot in a one-sided battle. Moreover, when Leonora flees, although she initially refuses to run, the girls are eventually caught in the process and held as hostages. The question then arises, Ernie and his subordinates plan to do business with Sepperka, but when they arrive at Silda Fortress, they realize that the flags are different and confirm that the kingdom has been invaded. Ernie wastes no time launching an attack. This is how he faces the enemy individually with his powerful mecha. First, he lets the prince destroy the entrance with his golden lion attack, then leaves the rest of the work to the super strong mecha created by Ernie with its custom ether core. It turns out to be a quick battle as, with his new power, he defeats more than 5 mechas in seconds. He then realizes that these robots were designed from the robot they previously stole, so Ernie considers them part of his collection. Since they were taken from his creation, they are also considered his property. Meanwhile, Prince Cristobal, who has conquered the kingdom of Sepperka, is anxious because he wants to make Leonora his wife. He is also somewhat frightened by the defeat they suffered at the fortress attacked by Ernie. So, he organizes everything to complete the conquest of the country. Based on advice from a woman from Camillo de Bronze, who stole Ernie's work, the prince launches an expedition to deal with them. However, what is surprising is that Ernie's orders keep them under surveillance, and Ernie discovers that they are holding Princess Leonora captive. Thus, the next mission is to rescue her. Ernie organizes an expedition to rescue Leonora, and shortly after, the enemy troops and Ernie's squad meet. Prince Cristobal, seeing from the air the centaur used by Ernie, doesn't wait long to attack. Likewise, those from Phoenix Platedo start firing at the ships. Although the long-range shots are not very effective, they eventually engage in combat with their mechas. Prince Cristobal can't resist unleashing his robot, which appears to control several swords like tentacles, and directly confronts Diathrich. Diathrich is able to put up a fight, but as the general's forces take losses, he decides to retreat to give Ernie a chance to devise a counter-strategy against their aerial fleet. Once they board the aircraft, the leader of Camillo de Bronze is there with a sinister laugh alongside Prince Cristobal, who then regrets underestimating the enemy. Meanwhile, Ernies have begun their efforts to rescue the royal family of Sepperka. They sneak into Fontainier, where they are being protected. Using their skills, they start exploring the castle towers where Princess Leonora, her friend Isidora, and her mother are likely being held. However, it is difficult to know where they are, as they have to guess among the 4 towers. After deciding to split up, they manage to check the towers simultaneously. As night falls, all the mechas fly across the city until they reach the castle. Ernie successfully rescues the first member of the royal family without any issues. Prince Enris also succeeds in the rescue group, but this time he faces the most troublesome situation, as every aid that comes from Leonora is hindered by the excuse that she has no other place to hide and feels weak. If only the knight hadn't subdued her with the excuse of chivalry, honor might not have been achieved. However, once the girls are out, they enjoy the beautiful view, meet up with Phoenix Platedo, and reunite with their family. Surely, the enemy won't stand idle. Guessing where they might flee, the resistance sends a group to find them. In this attack expedition, we meet a tech addict like Ernie named Horatio Cork, who is responsible for creating the powerful weapons that enabled Alodic to carry out the massive invasion. This person is very excited to fight just to see Ernie's technology. When they meet, Ernie is also very enthusiastic about seeing the air fleet, and immediately dives in with his mecha to take a closer look at the contents of the arsenal. On the other hand, Horatio is also fascinated by the different ways Ernie's mecha flies, using most of its power to destroy many enemy robots and damage the ship with gravity. Although Horatio wants to keep watching the show, the situation forces them to retreat. Losing this battle makes Prince Cristobal furious because he failed to marry Leonora. and he doesn't know that they have already taken her. The enemy starts preparing for a counterattack, although they still don't know the identity of the enemy clearly. However, they eventually conclude that they are Freenville warriors and should not be underestimated, especially Ernie's mecha, which was seen flying. Preparations for the attack begin. Meanwhile, Ernie's arrive in the city of Missiler, a city in Sepulchre that hasn't fallen yet. Upon arriving, Ernie immediately thinks of strengthening the local mechas to be more effective against the enemy. A deal is made with Kearney to allow them to take the spoils of war from the enemy. The process of personalizing the mechas and creating anti-aircraft rockets begins to gain enough resources to defeat the enemy fleet. However, while everyone is working to save the kingdom, it seems the princess loses her spirit again and instead slows down the work. Ernie's, who are kind-hearted, form a committee to motivate the princess by giving this task to someone who calls himself a knight. So, he has to do his duty to motivate the princess, and although this waifu doesn't seem to want to help, she is eventually brought along to show how hard others are working to convince her to fulfill her duty as a princess, which is to keep her troops' morale high. This morale is eventually maintained after the kingdom's robots are tested in the first wave of enemy attacks, and it is seen that besides being resilient, the attacks are also effective with the new designs added by Ernie. A crushing victory. But the health side does not give up easily because this time they send troops from Comillo de Bronx. Their leader comes with the ambition to win a prize to revive their family. They try old tactics that worked before, but this time they fail because at first they fail to injure the princess, whom they tried to attack while she was asleep. Moreover, they also fail to steal one of the mechas because these models are now equipped with access locks that allow exclusive use by the pilot. The enemy, trapped in a kind of ambush, the leader of Comillo de Acero, when surrounded, tries to escape. However, Edgar stops him, and after recalling their old unfinished battle, Edgar shows how much he has grown, as well as the superiority of his mecha. At this point, as he defeats him, he makes the leader regret not finishing him off earlier. After this victory, Eleonora expressed her sincere gratitude, then prepared herself for the upcoming final battle. However, what awaited them was a large-scale anti-air defense as soon as they reached Ernie's sanctuary. First, the dark night sky was illuminated to intercept them, leading the enemy forces to launch a missile barrage that forced the mecha to lose altitude and land earlier than planned. Consequently, the Phoenix Plateado launched a direct attack, with Edgar taking the lead as a shield, giving the prince the opportunity to unleash his devastating attack that destroyed many enemy robots. The few that remained tried to escape, but it was too late as the rear of Centauro chased them down and completely annihilated them. Meanwhile, Horacio merely observed Ernie's departure to see how their flight went, and after his curiosity was satisfied, the enemy ships became gravely threatened. Ernie's not only managed to break through without any issues but also succeeded in dismantling the ships, forcing Prince Cristobal to order a retreat. However, Ernie noticed that the first ship to depart might be carrying someone important, so he pursued it to stop it. With no other choice, Prince Cristobal was forced to confront Ernie's with his mecha, demonstrating the standard power of his mecha. In an attempt to recruit Ernie's to his side, Prince Cristobal offered them everything to join him. However, Ernie replied that if he were given the right to create, distribute, and direct his mecha, he would consider it. Otherwise, the prince's titles and wealth were irrelevant. Seeing this unacceptable demand, the prince prepared for battle but was no match for Ernie, who easily neutralized him, even disabling his secondary weapons. Feeling defeated, the prince attempted a sacrificial move to take Ernie down with him, destroying his own ship and ending his life, while Kern continued flying, avoiding the seemingly clumsy attacks from the mecha. Ernie's used the distraction created by the prince to escape, securing the first victory for Ernie's order. Afterward, a celebration awaited, especially since Ernie's team had successfully forced the enemy to retreat from a key city in Perka. Once settled there, Eleonora was declared queen, and Ernie's quickly began investigating the remnants of the enemy forces, discovering that they were using concentrated ether for some of their weapons, which provided nearly limitless energy but at the cost of reactor meltdown after the first use. Ernie also studied the flight mechanisms of the enemy's ships and understood how they functioned, although he secretly wanted to meet his technological rivals to ask a few questions. After that, the women of Perka asked Ernie's to lend them some of their weaponry, and with this help, Perka managed to reclaim the lost fortresses. However, from one of the conquered castles, a very powerful enemy weapon emerged. Horacio, taking advantage of the growing hatred among the enemy forces, promised Princess Catalina a definitive weapon that would not only dominate the skies, but also decisively defeat the enemy. Thus, he created a mechanical dragon that used the same propulsion power as Ernie's. Ernie was unaware that the enemy was also implementing his ideas. However, before he could ponder it further, he had to react quickly to avoid an attack and prepare for the tough battle ahead. Ernie's, without hesitation, launched an immediate attack to engage the massive mechanical dragon in close combat. Although this dragon was large, it was agile enough to evade Ernie's approach. However, Ernie continued to monitor from the air, aiming to exhaust the dragon's energy. Meanwhile, a ground battle also ensued, with numerous enemy mechas appearing, including a man armed with multiple swords who had promised Dietrich revenge. Upon seeing him, Dietrich quickly switched swords, frustrated that the man, with a processor, could force his machine to move quickly, intimidating Dietrich. Additionally, Addy, from the ground, saw the tough battle Ernie was facing, as all his attacks were being deflected by the electric shield. Seeing this, Wifi, who was in Centauro, decided to assist him. As soon as he approached Ernie's battlefield, he managed to fire anti-air missiles at the dragon, giving Ernie a chance to approach the dragon's control base. However, in a sudden move, the dragon managed to break free from Ernie and send him flying. Despite this, Ernie was not completely deterred, and when he confronted the dragon again, he did not expect the surprise that Horatio had prepared as a counterattack. By launching smoke missiles, Horatio lured Ernie into an attack, but as soon as Ernie passed through the barricade, he realized that the smoke had damaged his propulsion, causing him to fall from the sky. In their second attempt to end the fight, the enemy was shocked by the amount of mana Ernie's robot still possessed, and seeing signs of retreat, they also withdrew as their ether energy tanks were nearly depleted. Despite maintaining his flight, Ernie, feeling cornered for the first time, vowed that next time would be different. However, this last encounter ended in a stalemate, leading to a temporary defeat as it allowed him to regroup and regain momentum, eventually capturing the enemy base. Now, Ernie's had to take time to repair their mecha, adding filters to protect their propulsors. Meanwhile, the enemy was also taking steps to secure a temporary victory on their side, with Horatio showing the commander the new modifications being made to his dragon-shaped mech, explaining that this time he would add an ether processor so that energy would no longer be an issue. However, there was a danger that such power could become uncontrollable, but the commander, determined to save his son, would do anything. Thus, both sides were finalizing their preparations and planning their strategies against the mesh dragon that Ernie's would face. So, Princess Eleonora stated that if she was the reason they couldn't decide what forces to send to the ancient capital, then she would join Ernie's forces so they wouldn't have to split, and with a united front, they would drive the enemy out. With this decision, Eleonora gave a speech to boost everyone's morale, and thus they went out to fight. This time they first had to pass through a fortress that was quite difficult to conquer, as it housed most of the enemy's seemingly invincible forces with its armada. However, Ernie's then appeared with their anti-aircraft missiles, and this time Horatio was with the soldiers to see what Ernie would bring out. As soon as the dragon appeared, Ernie's also moved forward, but this time on a ship modified from Horatio's model to surprise the enemy, and this time Ernie would have every chance to win. However, in reality, the battle would be determined by the filtering mission of the Silhouette's Gears team, who were tasked with opening the gates of the fortress. But at that moment, the main battle was concentrated in the air, where Ernie's and their forces launched a direct attack. But in the end, it was in vain as the dragon took the mesh to the clouds to fire its missiles without harming the soldiers on the ground. But the electric shield became a problem as it deflected all attacks. However, Ernie's didn't care, as they gradually surrounded the enemy to play their trump card. And at a moment of distraction, Ernie's ship launched a special missile that completely incinerated the dragon mecha, and in this way, they surrounded the enemy, who was also under pressure on the ground. Because in a certain way, the Silver Phoenix managed to infiltrate the fortress and began opening its gates, allowing the robot battle to begin, where the enemy robots with multiple swords appeared again. This time, Edgar had to face them, and despite their numbers, the enemy slowly began to turn the tide. Once again in the air, the ethnic Moraquians communicated with each other in their battle, with each one defending what they did best. What was clear was that the dragon mecha had unleashed all its power by using concentrated ether, giving it the advantage this time. And seeing that his attacks were ineffective, Ernie chose to launch a direct assault on the dragon. Surprisingly, he managed to wound the dragon, and even amid the enemy's attacks, Ernie was able to dodge and directly strike the enemy's base. Just as they won the battle in the air, they also triumphed on the ground, as Edgar successfully held off the mecha's attack with many of the most troublesome swords. By holding them off, Leon Dorado's powerful strike was able to destroy the leading mecha of the resistance. With their leader defeated, the remaining enemy soldiers collapsed, and in the air, Ernie, having completely defeated the dragon after melting its engine, forced the commander, with no other options, to sacrifice himself along with the entire ship to destroy the queen who was watching from the ground. As you know, she was very troublesome and unnecessary, but when told to retreat, this girl refused because of her ego. Fine, you're okay, complicating Ernie's work with her brute force mecha, trying to prevent the dragon's fall. However, with the remaining energy, the commander launched an attack that endangered Leonora, who refused to move to make things easier. But this situation helped Kit, as the Shining Knight, deliver the final blow. Thus, the young man managed to neutralize the dragon robot's control, guiding the dragon to a safe place, securing a complete victory. After that, the capital could begin its recovery. Eleonora's inauguration was officially conducted, and with the job done, the entire order of protagonists left with their new ships. Although Leonora faced a separation from her knight, they promised to meet again. Finally, back home, Ernie was rewarded with his own laboratory. Initially, no one paid much attention to him because of his obsession with mecha, but in the end, through his work, he managed to enhance the kingdom's air power, enabling them to conquer the health tech kingdom definitively.